What's going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to another episode of Market Watch Mondays. As always, I'm your host, Mike, aka at Mike Me Up with 2Ps on Twitter. Man, it's good to be back for another week, man. This is my favorite show to record. Hopefully, it's your favorite show to watch. Before we get into anything today, first of all, we got to hit that intro. All right, it's another good Saturday afternoon here in Sacramento. Just got back from lunch and I wanted to hop on the mic here to talk about some interesting topics that I wanted to go over today. Today's going to be a Devy and college-focused episode. Now, I know some of y'all out there do not play in Devy leagues, but this will still be very valuable for you because it'll give you a little bit of insight into how I think about the prospects, which in turn drives value for future rookie classes, but also just a little bit of my strategy and my approach when it comes to Devy. I don't think I've ever done any Devy content on here other than just talking about players and class rankings and all that, which is all fun, but as you guys know, this is a dynasty and thought-driven podcast, right? The whole thing, the whole premise and mantra of this show goes back to that old saying, like, you give a man a fish, he eats for a day, you teach a man how to fish, and he eats for a lifetime, right? And that's what I'm all about. I want to pass on the strategies that have worked for me onto you guys because I want you guys to crush your leagues. I want every single Patreon member, subscriber of the YouTube channel, every single one of you to be a winner in your league, unless you're in a league with me, because I want to win those leagues. So all you guys in the Wolfpack Patreon, take it fucking easy on your boy, and make sure you can pass me the W at some point. It doesn't have to be this year. It doesn't have to be next year. But at some point, I would like to take home a win in that league. And it's a tough league. I'm telling y'all, man. It's one of the toughest leagues I've been in. A lot of guys, a lot of sharps in that league, sharper than any analyst that I've played with. But more importantly, they all know how I think. So it's tough to operate in that league. But anyways, let's get back to business. I'm recording this on Saturday, so again, it's not going to have any of the Week 3 NFL content for you guys in here. This is just how I record and the timing of how it works in order for me to get it out to y'all on Monday at 2 a.m. Pacific time sharp. But again, it doesn't matter because, again, it's just all about strategy. And this week I want to focus on Devy. And before we get into like the strategy portion, though, I just want to say this, man. Bijan Robinson is a fucking monster, right? The phrase like can't miss prospect gets thrown around way too much, and honestly, it should never get thrown around because anyone can miss. But I'm gonna use a new term to describe him, and it's can't miss value. And what do I mean by that? I mean like between now and the NFL draft in 2023, Bijan Robinson, one of the safest assets in all of Dynasty and Devy, right? And I say that 2023 first is one of the safest assets if you don't play in Devy. So that's how that kind of transitions, but a bet on Bijan Robinson today is basically a bet on him not getting injured. He's already shown everything we need to see from a running back of his caliber so far in his career. Like, we do not need to see, at least I do not need to see much more from Bijan Robinson in order to know that this guy's going to be a stud from a fantasy asset perspective and from an NFL perspective. At a bare minimum, probably going to be a very highly drafted running back. And to me, those are the most rare, but also the most valuable assets in dynasty leagues is stud, young running backs with workhorse upside. And he absolutely has all of that. All right. Bijan Robinson has been my Devy 101 since, I don't know, like maybe halfway through last year, after watching him tear up the college stage, just nonstop as a true freshman in Texas, coming in as the most highly touted prospect as well. He was the running back one per 24/7 Sports, so the most highly touted prospect comes in college, tears it up immediately, 86 carries, 703 yards, 8.2 yards per carry, 4 tutties, and the most important part, 15 receptions for 196 yards for 13.1 yards per catch. So showing a lot of efficiency there as well. But there's just nothing to not like about him. And he's got the prototype size already. He had it as a freshman. This year it came back a little bit stronger, standing at 6 foot, 215 pounds. So he checks every single box that you can think of, right? Size, speed. He's tested in college. He's an absolute monster on the athletics on the athletic department. We can see it on the field as well. Tackle breaking monster on the big screens that you guys watch on Saturday every single week. He's got the receiving upside. He can carry the full load. This is the guy that's probably going to be a very highly drafted prospect. This is the next version of like the Jonathan Taylors and DeAndre Swifts. Like DeAndre Swift, after his rookie year, after his sophomore year, I was like, okay, I'm ready to draft this guy. I didn't need to see any more in his junior season. And he went out and did fine in his junior season, but I did not need to see any more after those two things because he showed every trait that we care about as fantasy gamers. Jonathan Taylor, very similar. He could have not come back for his junior year and still been an absolute monster. It's very rare to find these types of guys. Cam Akers, another guy. Rest in peace to the Achilles. But Cam Akers, another guy in college. Just serial winners, man. These guys are highly touted. Came in. Bijan Robinson, serial winner. Went to a big program and just dominated right out the gate. And he's doing it again this year. I mean, if you look at Bijan Robinson's stats, you can see it on the screen. His freshman year, obviously, pretty big monster season. Very, very efficient. Getting involved in all phases of the game, right? And then you look at 2021, which is so far 3 games. Still putting up monster performances, still getting involved in the receiving game. If anything, he's getting a little bit more involved. You know, his first game out there, he had 4 catches. Only had 1 catch the last couple of games, but that's pacing out to a little bit better than what he was already at last year. And then obviously now you're seeing, you know, that a higher end workload, 20 carries, 19 carries. And it's no surprise that this guy was highly touted coming out of high school because look at his freaking high school stats. These are video game numbers, all right? In his final year of high school, 126 rushing attempts, 2,200 plus yards, and 38 touchdowns. That is insane. Just absolutely absurd, like video game-like numbers. He has been hyped but lived up to the expectations so far at every single stage of his career, and there's no reason that I can foresee that he does not continue that trend coming into the NFL. And if you are playing in Devy leagues, the Devy leagues that I played in so far this offseason, Bijan Robinson was going far too low. I was landing him in the 3rd round of a startup, which is just absurd. I think, you know, I have him as a top 20 startup asset today. If you are a Wolfpack Patreon member, you can see my combined rankings, including all Devy prospects, so you can get an idea of how I rank NFL players relative to college players and trying to account for that risk. But come next season, like he will be a 1st round startup pick. So to me, having him as a top 20 pick in that 2nd round is already a discount, just accounting for the maybes of maybe he gets injured or maybe he somehow busts and doesn't get drafted highly. But like in terms of safety, security, and premium blue chip assets, Bijan Robinson is just that. And I was lucky enough to draft Bijan Robinson as a freshman in the Destination Devy Listener League. So I grabbed him in my 2nd year, I guess it was the 2nd year or 3rd year of that league. After bringing on Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers, I drafted him. I drafted Trey Lance and all that. So it was it was a great time, and I drafted him in a couple other leagues as well this offseason. Like I said, when I thought he was super undervalued. I think, you know, if you're drafting startup anywhere past the 2nd round for Bijan Robinson is absolute steal. I think 2nd round is fair value, and honestly, you could make a push. He's closer to top 12 than he is to top 30. So he's closer to that 1st round, in my opinion, than he is to the 3rd round. So it's really going to be just a beautiful, beautiful time to watch this player kind of. I think it's bullshit that they have the rules of 3 years out of high school, because Bijan Robinson is today. He's ready to go into the NFL right now and just produce and just keep his legs fresh and not get injured. Hopefully they don't like run him in the ground. Hopefully he stays fresh. Hopefully he gets some limited touches just like DeAndre Swift, because we know he's got the prototype size, he's got the athleticism, and he's got the receiving ability to be a bell cow back. So we don't need to see him go out and get like 300 touches. Although if he does, I think it's going to be freaking incredible in terms of padding his stats. But I don't like I said, I've seen enough. This just really reminds me of DeAndre Swift. When I saw DeAndre Swift in his freshman and sophomore years, I was like, all right, well, I've seen enough now. There's really nothing else I need to see from DeAndre Swift to make me like him even more. Now, in that time, obviously, we saw Jonathan Taylor do historic things, so that bumped him up for me a little bit. But in terms of, you know, pure prospects, man, Bijan Robinson is it, man. Bijan Robinson. There's going to be a lot of debates coming out. You know, who's the running back one? Is it Bijan? Is it Jahmyr Gibbs? Is it Tank Bigsby, who I freaking love as well? But as much as I love Tank, as much as I love Gibbs, those are both studs and great playmakers. They are a tier down from a Bijan Robinson because, for example, Tank Bigsby is not as involved in the receiving game. He's an excellent rusher. He's probably capable in the receiving game. We just don't see him utilized in that facet too often. But an elite tackle-breaking monster, so that's always good to see, and also very, very athletic. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, just again, he's definitely stepped it up, dialed it way up on the receiving department, but he's just not as good as Bijan Robinson when it comes to rushing. So, like I said, look, the class is going to be stacked, right? You're going to have a lot of choices, but in terms of security blanket, if you are playing in Devy League and you are sitting on Bijan Robinson, that is the single safest asset that you can have, and that kind of rolls directly into like my strategy portion of Devy and how I kind of approach the game when it comes to Devy. For those of you guys who don't know what Devy is, I'm sorry, I probably should have done this in the beginning, but a Devy is a developmental league. So it's like a regular dynasty league, except you can draft college players. So you can draft a Bijan Robinson. You could have drafted a Jonathan Taylor when he was in college. You could have drafted a Trevor Lawrence when he was in college, which is exactly what I did. And what happens is you hold them on your taxi squad, so they don't do anything for you. They don't score points or anything for you. But when they get drafted in the NFL, then they automatically graduate into your team. And it's really, really fun because, like, just imagine investing your time and emotion and taking a shot on Bijan Robinson as a freshman before he's ever played it down and watching his meteoric rise. Or, if you're Ray GQ and you put the stamp of approval on Kyle Pitts way before the hype reached him, right? And you got him at that much of a discount. Those are the types of game-winning moves and league-winning moves you can make in Devy, and it's really awesome. It gets you emotionally invested in Saturdays as well. It forces you to watch the game, but for the most part, even if you don't want to be a hardcore Devy player, I really, really encourage all of you to try at least one Devy league because it really gives you insight into future classes. You'll know way before everyone else. Like now, like it's basically common knowledge that 2023 class is going to be really, really good, right? And it's almost impossible to try and trade for 2023 picks right now if you're in a league that knows what they're doing. But I've been accumulating 2023 picks for 2 years, so I have a ton of it, across a lot of my leagues before it hit the spike. And it's because I knew there were prospects like Bijan Robinson, like Gibbs, like Tank Bigsby, right? Like all these young receivers as well. So it's a totally different game, and it forces you to really dive down deep into future rookie classes, and that will really benefit you in all of your other dynasty leagues. You'll know when to move early for those picks, when to capitalize and basically capture market share of a complete rookie class, like I always preach, right? You'll know which classes that you can control and go all in on, and it really helps benefit you. So it's a great format to play. It is my favorite format to play by far. Devy leagues, just having that facet of the game, and all those like new trade assets and taking those risks and applying the data on the prospecting side in college football. It's just a ton of fun. And there's just so much going on in college football. Like nobody knows everything, right? Like I don't care who you are. Like nobody has time. And if they say they do know everything, they're fucking lying to you because there's just way too many games for any one individual to actually fully grasp. So if you feel like you're behind, like I do a lot of times, chances are someone else feels behind too. You'll have all the offseason to kind of catch up and cycle through that data and really kind of make your picks and make your stances. So like I said, fully encourage you all to do it. I started a Devy League for the Patreon members in the Wolfpack Patreon this offseason, 24 Team 2 copy. It's already lit. Like, it's crazy. People are trading. So many trades that went on throughout the startup draft, and I'm expecting a lot of trade activity over the next couple of weeks as well. So it's been super, super exciting. But I highly encourage y'all to go into that format. Now, having said that, there's lots of nuances and lots of different approaches to Devy that I want to cover, for those of you that are thinking about getting into it, or for those of you that are already into it. And it's a little bit different from Dynasty, like NFL side, right? NFL side, like, in Superflex especially, like, people want to go all in on quarterbacks, right? That is the thing. But to me, if I were to rank like the least risky to the most risky assets when it comes to college, the college side, it would be wide receiver, right? Running back, quarterback, tight end. Tight end's always riskiest. There's no way around it. Like Kyle Pitts are unicorns. Like you get way more versions of like, who's a good one. Brevin Jordan, for example, he was viewed on par with Kyle Pitts at some point, and then he totally fell off. And he's like basically a non-factor draft asset this year, and just brutal fall from grace. So if there's a lot more of those, it's just a very, very finicky game to play on the tight end side. But whereas on the NFL side, right, I would say like quarterbacks are not not like the riskiest. Like it would be running backs first for me, right, in regular dynasty, and then like wide receiver. And then maybe like quarterback and wide receiver are pretty close. But all of them are really, really close on the NFL side. But I think there's very, very different risk profiles on the Devy side. Now, I'll kind of go through and explain why. Wide receivers, to me, are the safest because we have the most data, right? We have a lot of data to analyze wide receivers, from breakout age to market share data to yards per team pass attempt. There's a lot of advanced analytics and metrics you can use to really limit your wide receiver bust rate. And I mean, if I look back to some of my Devy picks, right, like a lot of the guys I picked Rashad Bateman after his freshman year as a 4th-round pick. I picked like Rondale Moore as a 1st-round pick. And a lot of these guys really flowed through to the NFL really well because they were all, very productive, very athletic, and that translates well, we know, from the college to the NFL side, right? And athleticism doesn't matter as much at the wide receiver position. Like I love T. Higgins, and he didn't even test. And if in the part that he did test, then he wasn't even that good. But it didn't matter because at the wide receiver position, that's not what matters most, right? And those data points can be risky, and they come back to burn you later on down the line. But if you can check off all the boxes with production, it really, really limits the scope of your risk when it comes to wide receivers. So my approach to Devy is I love to grab a lot of the young stud wide receivers early because I think they hold value the most and increase in value as well. But so they're a lot less risky, basically, than any other position, right? And then comes running backs. Now the reason why running backs I feel is a better bet in traditional NFL leagues versus Devy is because in college, the running back position is like totally different, right? If you're Ray GQ explains to me really well. Like if you're in a college program, you're a college coach, there's no limit to the talent that you can bring in. That's why Ohio State, Alabama, all these guys, they all have 4-star, 5-star recruits. They have like 3-4 of them every single year coming to the school. So competition is super, super heavy at the running back position, right? And if you're a highly touted prospect and you come in, right, you were probably the best player in your state, but now you come to Alabama and you're like the 3rd best player on your team, right? So there's a lot of volatility there. So a lot of hurdles for them to clear. So investing in freshman running backs is not always the best idea because there's just so much movement in the depth chart, right? Like everyone wants to invest in these highly touted 24/7 5-star prospects. And granted, there's some Bijan Robinsons, there's some Travion Hendersons out there, but if you go back and look at those top 5 lists, there are guys some of you have never even heard of because they never made it to the NFL. They barely even made it performing in college, right? Like John Emery is one who was like a very, very highly touted freshman running back, went to LSU, yielded yielded touches to like Brissett and CEH, right? He just never ever made it. And there's a lot of those. There's way more of those than Bijan Robinson. So for me at the running back position, especially true freshman running back, it's an incredibly risky bet to make. So I'm very hesitant and not really taking the plunge much on true freshman running backs. Like, I'll take a couple here and there on guys like Travion and Bijan Robinson just because of how prolific their production profiles were in college and how athletic and their size. But for the most part, freshman running backs are not the best investment for you to make. There's just too much going on with the depth chart. There's too much inflow of talent every single year. But then when you look at the running back position as a whole, they have to jump through way more hurdles than wide receivers, right? What do I mean by that? Running back. First, you got to climb the depth chart, climb the seniority depth chart, and produce the college level, right? That's already hard enough to do, right? And we know it's just a very, very tough thing to do. But then you also have to clear all the NFL tests, right? You have to stay healthy throughout your entire collegiate career. NFL, we know running backs probably the most injury-prone position in all of sports. So, you have to climb that hurdle. But more importantly, like I said, while athleticism and speed and stuff doesn't matter as much for wide receiver, it absolutely matters for the running back position. Not because I think it makes you a worse running back, but because the NFL clearly cares. They want big guys. They want fast guys. So, when you're drafting these running backs, man, you're praying that even if they hit the production mark, you're praying that they don't pull a flop at the NFL Combine. And one that comes to mind is Elijah Holyfield, right? Wait, is his name Elijah Holyfield? I think it's Holyfield. I always confuse it because it's Elijah Holyfield because of the boxer. But anyways, you don't want a situation with Elijah Holyfield who went, he blew up in his junior year, went 159 carries for about 1,000 yards, a couple receptions, and everyone was really hyped on him. And then he went to the NFL Combine. He ran like a 4.8 or 4.7, and at that point, you're just not even draftable anymore. So that's a big, big risk for running back position when you're running if you're running 4.7 something as a running back. Man, your chance of getting drafted are very, very low. So it's just another hurdle that you have to jump, right? And then the last hurdle is this. If for running backs, if you land in a team and you land on Christian McCaffrey's team, that's it, man. Unless he gets injured, you're not doing much. If you land on Saquon Barkley's team, if you land on, Alvin Kamara's team, it's going to be very hard to usurp, right? Because there's only one ball to go around, and they can only hand it off to one guy. And granted, there's much more committees these days, and you maybe get a little bit more opportunity, but landing spot is so much more important for running back than it is for wide receiver. For a wide receiver, if you're talented, you go somewhere. Like CeeDee Lamb, right? He went to a team with Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. Didn't fucking matter because he was a stud, right? Justin Jefferson went to a team with Adam Thielen. Didn't matter. He was a freaking stud, right? Calvin Ridley went to Julio Jones' team. It didn't matter. He was a stud, right? Wide receiver talents can coexist. Every year we have top passing teams that can support multiple top 24 wide receivers, sometimes multiple top 12 wide receivers. That is very rare when it comes to running back, right? If you're not the New Orleans Saints with an Alvin Kamara and a Mark Ingram, getting a top 12 tandem at the running back position, that is a tough sell. So just on scarcity alone, right, the chances of you drafting a Devy running back and surviving from true freshman all the way to NFL production are very, very low. Now, I have a lot of Bijan Robinson. I really feel like he is going to make that survival. But for the most part, it is not a very, very good bet. It's a very risky bet to make, right? And that's why I think the running backs are a lot more risky than wide receivers. Whereas wide receivers, you have the production profile, you check it off. You look year to year, Jamar Chase didn't come out of nowhere, right? Most of the top-end wide receivers, Rondale Moore didn't come out of nowhere, right? Justin Jefferson even didn't come out of nowhere. The production was there. If you were looking, you would have found it, right? A.J. Brown did not come out of nowhere. There are a lot of safer ways to cash in on wide receiver than there is for running back. So my typical Devy strategy is I like to go, if I'm drafting early, I like to go for even, for locked in studs at running back. So someone like an Isaiah Spiller, right, or Bijan Robinson, Tank Bigsby, these types of guys that have shown true freshman production and are showing it again in their sophomore year. I can go for those guys, but more importantly, I'm looking for the true freshman breakouts, the big sophomore breakouts at the wide receiver position, because I think they are the ones that are going to carry your team and really good to build around. And they're ones that are really easy to kind of flip also. I found that, last year, for example, when I drafted George Pickens and his hype reached the peaks, I flipped him to try and get into a CeeDee Lamb, right? So, when it comes to the wide receiver position, those one-to-one swaps are a lot easier to make, I think, than some of the running backs. So that's another reason why, in my tier of risk, I think wide receivers is in its own, and then it's running backs, and then I think it's quarterbacks, right? Unlike the NFL, where a lot of times we've seen a good starter, we'll know there'll be a starter for a long time, right? The elite guys are gonna be elite. In college, it's just very different, right? First of all, the quarterback position is it's one of the hardest ones to do, right? It's one of the hardest ones to learn. It's one of the hardest ones to transition. Why? Because you are being asked to do the most out of any other position, right? It's a mental aspect to it more so than any other position, and it's just very hard to measure the mentality of a person, right? Now, we can talk about draft capital and stuff like that, but Trevor Lawrence, he's a unicorn, right? There aren't that many Trevor Lawrence. The class we just saw, this class in 2021 of that many highly drafted quarterbacks, you just don't see that very often. And sometimes when you do see that, you get a class like the Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen class. It's just very, very hard to make that transition, making that a very risky asset. So it really blows my mind, when people rate true freshman quarterbacks so highly. Coming into this year, people just thought DJ, I can't pronounce his last name properly, so I'm not going to try until I can actually learn it properly. But DJ, you guys looking him up, he's the starting quarterback for Clemson. A lot of people had DJ as a 1.01 in Superflex formats for Devy. And that just did not make any sense for me. I understand he had a couple flashes, a couple good games last year, but I think people just looked at Trevor Lawrence and then looked at those couple of games for DJ and said, yeah, you know what? This is the next Trevor Lawrence. Let's just roll him right up, and he's going to ascend to the throne immediately. Whereas for me, I'm gonna rank a running back over him. I had Bijan Robinson as my Devy 101 the entire time because the running backs will transition a lot easier, right? And Bijan Robinson already proved it. It's already proven it has a protectable size. Now, and then behind Bijan Robinson, I have Tank Bigsby and then a lot of wide receivers as well, right? So I think, when it comes to the risk profile of a running back versus a quarterback, I will take the proven running back over the unproven quarterback 10 times out of 10, without question, because that is a role that I know can transition a lot easier. Now, I said it's a lot. Running back is riskier than wide receiver for sure, but the upside is also higher, and that's where you start making the trade-off, right? I talked about the tiers for risk profiles and wide receivers, the safest asset, but it doesn't necessarily have the highest upside because, as we know, wide receiver is relatively deep with talent. We are flush with tons and tons of talented wide receivers in the league right now, but they don't have the weekly upside and the league winning upside that hitting on a running back does. So you got to kind of weigh those costs. So I always flip back and forth between running back and wide receiver when it comes to allocating my assets and my capital based on what I'm trying to achieve with that capital. But I never really look at a quarterback and think I'm going to push all my chips in at quarterback because we barely know quarterbacks in the NFL, right? There's a couple of elite guys, but in that middle tier, you just never know what's going to happen. Quarterback annual finish are one of the most unpredictable in all of fantasy sports, which is why I advocate against dumping all your early capital on quarterback, contrary to popular opinion when it comes to super flex leagues. But for running back, we can see it's a lot more predictable. All they need is a draft capital, right? So when I'm betting on Bijan Robinson, I'm expecting him to get first round, second round draft capital. That's it. And if he gets that, the chance of him hitting skyrocket, right? Whereas a quarterback, they could be a top end pick, but we've seen so many busts at that position because no one is that good at analyzing quarterbacks because admittedly is a very, very hard position to analyze, right? So I think when it comes to Devy, my strategy is to blend a good mix of risk tolerance and upside, and how I do that is via the wide receiver and running back position. So I love targeting early breakout wide receivers because they're if I think about it this way, they're like the security blanket for my value, right? When I'm looking at Devy, they don't contribute to your production, right? So you're looking for those Devy picks that you make to increase or hold value over time. Honestly, if they hold value over time, that's already probably a little bit of a win, just given how risky Devy is, and a lot of people just whiff and just lose completely. But if you can mix in some nice upside there as well, that's really the money spot. So, focus on wide receiver, right? And then mix in some high upside running backs. Do not go all in on high upside running backs. Don't go in and draft every single rookie running back for class unless, you have some sort of inside knowledge and godly assessment that the rest of us don't have. But for the most part, you really want to build the core of young, productive wide receivers that are projected to get high draft capitals. For me, that's guys like Garrett Wilson, Traylon Burks. I drafted Keyshawn Boutte early because he was an early breakout, and before this year, he's absolutely a monster right now. If you guys look at Keyshawn Boutte's stats, it's not even funny. He's getting a touchdown 1 in every 3 touches, so he's just an absolute monster over there at wide receiver ULSU. But I drafted him early this year. But just building around that core group of young wide receivers and mixing in some nice upside running backs, assuming you get them at a decent value. I saw Travion Henderson go in the middle of the first round of Devy startups. And for me, that's too rich, right? Because in that range, I'm getting Garrett Wilsons. I'm getting the Traylon Burks. I'm getting, some of these other stud, proven, productive wide receivers already. So I'm going to take those guys more often than not. But now, if you see a Traylon Burke fall to the back end of the first, early part of the second, middle of the second, then that's the time to pull the trigger because you mix in that upside. You take your first round pick, right? You grab a Tank Bigsby or you grab a high end wide receiver, and then you mix in that risk and high upside. And you can't play it safe all the time and expect to win. You gotta have to take some risk, but you gotta take a managed approach to risk. So for me, that's I manage my risk by creating a value floor with wide receivers and then layer on running back, running back talent and running back on top of that, right? And if you're lucky enough to draft a Bijan Robinson in the first round, that's your value blanket and your upside blanket, just like in the regular NFL, right? But if you're not, and you're drafting, a little bit later, and the Bijan Robinsons, the Tank Bigsbys, the Breece Halls, Isaiah Spillers, the Gibbs, like these top end guys are gone. You got to go wide receiver, in my opinion, right? And I don't think it's worth it to fire that early on a quarterback in Devy. I know people do it, but for me, it's just not my game. Like I'd rather draft the positions where you can tell very easily if that guy's already a good player versus the quarterback. It's too hard, man. It's quarterback analysis is too hard. I suck at it, admittedly. I think everyone sucks at it, but the people that suck at it the least still suck at it. Like we're just not good when it comes to valuing that position because it's very hard. It's just very hard to project. It's very hard to analyze. Like, I mean, if we had a Trevor Lawrence every year, Justin Fields every year, sure, like I'd take more risk there. But those are the abnormalities. Like you're gonna see, like we've been spoiled with the quarterbacks over the last few years. We got Justin Herbert, right? We got Joe Burrow. We got Kyler Murray before that. We got Josh Allen, Lamar. We've been fucking spoiled with the influx of quarterback talent. This is not normal. Over the next couple of years, you're gonna see like what some down classes can do. I mean, you can think back, man. There were some brutal classes like the Geno Smith class, right? And there were no quarterbacks coming out of that you care about now, right? And you're gonna get classes like that over the next coming years, and it's gonna reset the reality for people that think you can just draft a rookie quarterback and just go all in and be fine, because we are spoiled right now with talent at the position. And for me, when it comes to Devy drafts, I'd much rather fill my quarterbacks on the NFL side for the most part, and then fill talent, like skill positions, on the Devy side. I try and avoid, for the most part, the Devy like quarterbacks, unless they're like a Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, right? Those guys where you can tell very early on they have like a very, very bulletproof profile. Shout out to Drew over at DFB Encounter. But I think for the most part, running backs and more importantly, wide receivers is how you really build that value insulation in your Devy picks. And, as someone like me that loves to play the value game and loves to play the strategy and the game theory behind it, I'm looking for value insulation for Devy picks, because like even if you're the guy that like holds, chances are the majority of your league is burning value. That is just the average expected value when someone drafts Devy pick. Like you're expecting for the most part that they're burning it, right? So if you're able to hold or retain and build on that hype and build on that floor for yourself, you're already off in a lead and in a better position than other people that are playing Devy. So that's kind of how I think about the game. Hopefully that's helpful for you guys. I didn't do too much player analysis here, but I just want to give you some thoughts into what I think. I mean, I talked about some of the players I like. I talked about Bijan Robinson. I talked about Tank Bigsby. I talked about Gibbs. Those are like my top guys in the 2023 class. I talked about Breece Hall, Isaiah Spiller in the 2022 class, right, as well. And then, I talked about Garrett Wilson, Traylon Burks in the 22 class in terms of wide receivers. And you have, in the 2023 side, you have Quentin Johnston, one of my favorites. You have Keyshawn Boutte, who's an absolute fucking monster, right? George Pickens from 2022. There's a lot of influx of talent in the Devy side that is going to be coming in the next couple of years. And it just pays to learn the game and know the game and really dive into some of this stuff, right? So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Hopefully you guys found it helpful. If you did, hop on down, hit the subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed already, hit a thumbs up. It helps us more than you know. Drop in the comments. Let me know what you liked, what you didn't like. I'll try and take a look at that and address going forward. If you like Devy stuff, if you like college stuff, let me know. I'll try and get more of that content out there for you guys. But I felt like this was a good time to kind of get into it because, we're 3 weeks deep into the college season. We have enough data points. We have enough hype building for some of these players. And I just want to talk about, how I'm approaching Devy leagues and how I kind of think about the game. For those of you out there that are in Devy leagues, that are thinking about what to do, and for those of you that aren't, try and talk you into playing it. Because honestly, I feel like it's a great untapped market. There's a lot of edge to be explored. I've been playing for a couple years. I still don't fucking know what I'm doing. It's still a huge learning experience, very, very humbling, but also just very, very exciting when you do hit on a player, when you do hit on that Bijan Robinson, when you do hit on a Kyle Pitts, when you do hit on a Cam Akers. Like, you've been attached to that person for 2-3 years, right? And to see them roll into your NFL team, I can't explain it. It's just a very, very satisfying and rewarding feeling. So for those of you true hardcore dynasty gamers out there, which I hope you guys are, if you're tuning in my channel, I don't think many casuals are coming into my channel, looking at stuff. If you are, welcome. Hopefully we turn you into a hardcore dynasty gamer. But if you are, this is definitely the format for you. And if you are a hardcore dynasty gamer, again, make sure you come and check us out, man. Patreon.com/OurPack. Discord channel, live sessions, my live rankings every month, updated monthly without fail for you guys. Devy rankings, NFL rankings, combined rankings, everything in there that you need to dominate your dynasty league. So come on over, check us out. It'll be the best money you ever spent. I promise you that in terms of the NFL and football content side. It's not. I'm not trying to be arrogant or anything, but I truly believe what I'm putting out there is the best that you can have and the best for at least improving your game from the dynasty side. So that's all I got for you guys this week. If you enjoyed, again, just hop on down there, show some love. But until next week, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy another Sunday of football. I'm going to be watching again from 10 a.m. until 10 p.m. when it ends. It's going to be another beautiful day. Let's pray. No more fucking injuries, man. No more injuries. We lost CMC for a few weeks, which was just brutal. We lost, even more players. It's just the worst part of the NFL and worst part of fantasy football and all that stuff. These are real people, livelihoods going away, so you hate to see it. But let's pray for an injury-free weekend and just good fucking old-fashioned football. I'm ready. You're ready. Hop on there. And, man, see y'all on the bird out, baby. Peace.